The LDS Church teaches that the Book of Mormon is the most correct of any book on earth, and the keystone of the religion. In addition to teaching the fullness of the everlasting gospel, the Book of Mormon contains the history of the ancient inhabitants of the Americas, namely the Nephites and the Lamanites, as written by the prophet-historian Mormon and his son Moroni upon the golden plates.
Every July in Palmyra, New York, Mormons celebrate their origins in an extravagant pageant on the hill Cumorah. Under a 40-foot golden statue of the angel Moroni, the pageant tells how the ancient prophet Mormon gave the plates to his son Moroni, and how he buried them in 400 AD on the very site where the pageant itself is unfolding. The tablets recall the story of Israelites who sailed from Jerusalem about 600 BC and were guided to a country that would one day be known as America. Here these ancient Israelites split into two races, the Nephites and the Lamanites. For hundreds of years, they engaged in brutal warfare. Here in America, during the 3 days after his crucifixion in Jerusalem, Christ came in his resurrected being to preach peace and righteousness to these warring people. Here in 1827, the young Joseph Smith would say he dug up the tablets recording this entire history that would become the Book of Mormon.
The Nephite civilization died out, but the Lamanites survived and became the principal ancestors of the American Indians. While the Book of Mormon contains many religious doctrines and principles, this video will look at the accuracy of the claim that the text is a historical record.
The kind of revelation that Joseph describes is the scandal of Mormonism, in the same way that the resurrection of Christ is the scandal of Christianity. But I also mean that it's a scandal in the sense that it is inseparable from the heart and soul of Mormonism, that one could no sooner divorce the historical claims of the Book of Mormon from the Church than one could divorce the story of Christ's resurrection from Christianity and survive with the religion intact.
So how do we test to see if the Book of Mormon is an actual historical document? The first thing we're going to look at is how Nephi quotes Isaiah. After the family of Lehi left Jerusalem, Nephi and his brothers went back to obtain some plates of brass that contained, among other things, the writings of the Old Testament prophet Isaiah. The Book of Mormon contains numerous lengthy sections taken directly from Isaiah. Nephi acknowledged Isaiah as his source, and he said, "And now I, Nephi, write more of the words of Isaiah, for my soul delighteth in his words." Part of the chapters of Isaiah that Nephi quotes are chapters 48 and 49, and he does this in 1 Nephi 20 through 21. Isaiah 53 is quoted later in the book of Mosiah, and Isaiah 54 is quoted in 3 Nephi chapter 22. Biblical scholars believe that Isaiah died around 687 BC, and that the book of Isaiah is the work of multiple authors, possibly 2 or 3 main authors, who added to his work after his death. It is commonly agreed that this division occurs between Isaiah 39 and 40, with the latter chapters being written by these additional authors. This conclusion is based on anachronisms in the text, such as the rise of Babylon, the destruction of Jerusalem, the rise of Cyrus the Great, and his overthrow of Babylon, all of which happened after the death of Isaiah. These latter chapters do not mention the name Isaiah. They use a different style, such as unique words and phrases. They take for granted the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by the Babylonians in 587 BC, that it had already taken place. In chapters 56 through 66 of Isaiah, the fall of Babylon, which happened in 539 BC, is considered a past event. Now, the whole reason that Lehi was told to flee Jerusalem, other than his life was going to be taken by the people he was preaching to, was to get out of Jerusalem before it was invaded by the Babylonians. That's also why Nephi went back to get the brass plates, so that they wouldn't perish when Jerusalem was destroyed. These things supposedly happened with Nephi and Lehi around 600 BC. This raises the question, how did the brass plates, obtained by Nephi in 600 BC, contain chapters of the book of Isaiah that had not been written yet? These words of Isaiah that Nephi cherished could not have been on the brass plates. He could not have quoted from them or copied them because they would not have been authored for a couple of more decades. This shows that the Book of Mormon is not historically accurate. Another way to test the historicity of the Book of Mormon is to look at the anachronisms that are within the text. Now, the Book of Mormon describes the flora, fauna, and technology that existed in the world of the Nephites. Nephi wrote, "And it came to pass that we did find upon the land of promise, as we journeyed in the wilderness, that there were beasts in the forest of every kind, both the cow and the ox and the ass and the horse, and the goat and the wild goat, and all manner of wild animals, which were for the use of man." Horses are mentioned throughout the Book of Mormon and were used to pull chariots for the Lamanites in Alma 18. However, the evidence shows that there were no cows or oxen or goats in the New World until the arrival of the conquistadors. Horses did evolve in North America, but became extinct at the end of the Pleistocene, about 12,000 years ago. Horses did not reappear in the Americas until the Spaniards brought them from Europe. Elephants are mentioned as existing in America and being used as beasts of burdens by the Jaredites in the Book of Ether, chapter 9. While elephants never existed in the Americas, mammoths did. However, like the horse, they went extinct around the end of the Pleistocene, many thousands of years before the time frame of the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon references the smelting and use of steel for weapons and tools throughout the text. "And it came to pass that as I, Nephi, went forth to slay food, behold, I did break my bow, which was made of fine steel. And we became exceedingly rich in gold and in silver and in precious things and in fine workmanship of wood, in buildings and in machinery, and also in iron and copper and brass and steel, making all manner of tools of every kind to till the ground and weapons of war. Wherefore he came to the hill Ephraim, and he did molten out of the hill, and made swords out of steel, for those whom he had drawn away with him. And after he armed them with swords, he returned to the city." Here's what we know about steel. The refinement process and carbonization techniques for producing steel would not be invented until around 300 BC. So how did Nephi figure out how to make a bow out of fine steel 300 years before steel was invented, and 2,000 years before the steel processing was advanced enough to fabricate such an item out of fine steel? Considering that the text claims that steel was used for building material, machinery, agriculture, and weaponry over hundreds of years, archaeologists should find an abundance of evidence of the use of steel in the Native American societies. A society that had such an advantage would have dominated all the societies that did not have that advantage. They would have been able to produce much more food, being able to work their fields with steel plows, than simple hunter-gatherer groups could have. Having steel weapons would have allowed them to keep it too. The Book of Mormon itself states that the Nephites were able to dominate the primitive Lamanites because they had steel swords, shields, helmets, and breastplates made from copper and brass. This allowed them to slaughter their enemies while having much fewer casualties on their side. So even the Book of Mormon claims that a society with these technologies would have dominated those without it. However, archaeologists cannot find any evidence for steel being used by the pre-Columbian Native Americans. There are no artifacts, mines, smeltering implements, or depictions of steel tools or weapons in their artwork. Surely something as important as steel would have shown up somewhere. There is no evidence that the Native Americans developed and used steel. The Book of Mormon describes the use of chariots being pulled by horses over a time period of hundreds of years. This implies the widespread use of the wheel. How could chariots be pulled by horses unless they had the wheel? Archaeology indicates that wheels were not used for travel in pre-Columbian America. No artifacts or their depictions have been found. If Lehi's descendants did use a wheel, there would have been evidence of wheels in the Americas before Columbus. Like I said before, technology spreads quickly, especially technology that allows one culture to dominate another like the wheel, and especially horse-drawn chariots would. The text also talks about the Nephites growing wheat and barley. It describes the use of silk. There is no evidence that these crops or silk existed in the Americas at this time. The evidence is overwhelmingly that there were no horses, elephants, cattle, oxen, goats, silk, wheat, barley, steel, steel swords, breastplates, shields, helmets, or depictions of such anywhere in the New World in the specified time frame of the Book of Mormon. Given that the Nephites and Lamanites began to cover the face of the whole earth, from the sea south to the sea north, from the sea west to the sea east, this is hard to explain. If the text is a true anthropological record, then why is there so little evidence that supports it, and massive amounts that contradict it?